So a very, very warm welcome to you to this Driver wide angle event, part of the People, Places and Personalisation series. We had a very interesting session this morning looking at the role of virtual and augmented reality as a tool for market research. And we have a lot more coming up all around city mapping and the role of city data as part of the COVID recovery. We've got more in-depth sessions on gamification and on looking at consumer behaviour in online shopping and how data is kind of being used in different ways through artificial intelligence, even in the last few months. So all of that's to come, and I'll go into more detail about those events at the end, but we're really excited about this series as a whole. But this afternoon specifically, we are here to have a roundtable format. So this is very much an open conversation that we're inviting you into. I'm very delighted to have 4 special guest experts I'll introduce in a second. And we're looking at data personalisation and the impact, role, questions, future innovation around personalisation as part of the customer experience. A little bit of housekeeping, as I said, if we can remain muted and invisible just until we have the open conversation, that's fantastic. But by all means, if you've got a burning thought or a question, put it in the chat function. I'm sure the speakers can respond to that if it's something that's relevant to what they're saying as they're saying it, or we'll come back to it when we look at the questions at the end. So the Driverartsdriver project, for those of you who haven't been a part of it to date, we are now in the last few months, but I don't think the project has ever been busier. It's a really exciting moment to be taking part in it. The aim of Driverartsdriver to spark a superfusion of creativity, technology and business, bringing together data science and research, the creative economy, and ways of looking at the role of data in innovation, technology, creative exploration and it's a major research project funded by the European Regional Development Fund and Arts Council England. Professor Cham, who's one of our speakers today, is the principal investigator for the driver side, so will, I'm sure, draw on some of the other parts of the wider project that I hope you will all access. It's not just these events. So Driverartsdrivercom is the place to find all of that resources, to book on the other events that I'll come to at the end, and to connect with other like-minded individuals that are part of this project. So I think that's the beauty of the site, is that it's a gateway to so many exciting individuals that are exploring data in different ways. So make sure that you do visit that site straight after this event, and the recording of this session will also be put up there as a resource. So we are recording the webinar this afternoon. If for any reason that's a problem for you and you don't want your contribution to be included, just send a private message to myself via the chat function, or to Ushi, who is my glamorous assistant working all the controls in the background, and just let us know and we can make sure that we do something in post-production. But otherwise, it will be available within a couple of days. Good. So what are we looking at today? Data personalisation and how that transforms customer experience. I'm not the expert on this. 4 of the people just alongside me are, so I'm not going to do anything really other than to cue them up. But the reason I invited these esteemed individuals to take part is because I thought that they all would bring a slightly different perspective to this conversation, and I'm really keen that this afternoon we look at this from different perspectives. The people I want to introduce to you is Pete Jenkins. Pete, wave your hand. Hello, Pete. Pete is the Chief Executive of Gamification Plus. He's pretty much the guru on gamification, not just here, but around the world. Written, spoken, and talked a lot about it, and the role of the kind of theory of gameplay as a mechanism for behaviour change. And Pete will be doing a more in-depth sessions, one of these later on in a couple of weeks' time. But welcome, Pete. Thank you for joining us. We have Professor Karen Cham, who is the lead for the Digital Catapult and for the Connected Futures programs at the University of Brighton, Professor of Digital Transformational Design, something like that. And as I said, one of the principal investigators of Driverartsdriver. So another global leader in this field. So really delighted to have Karen's expertise on today. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
And Dr. Sam Knowles, author, speaker, data storyteller, which is a title we should all aspire to have, and a friend to the Driverartsdriver program, having delivered a couple of sessions earlier in the year. Knows pretty much everything there is to know about the translation of data from numbers into storytelling, narrative, and persuasive arguments, and is going to bring some of that knowledge today. So thank you, Sam, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And we have definitely not leastly, but lastly on this list, Joe Williams. Joe is the Director of Experience West Sussex, a destination management organisation, and part of a real, a real pillar in the part of Sussex's kind of economic recovery, looking at how we continue to put Sussex on the map, particularly West Sussex and its natural environment, its culture, its people, its places, its businesses, and to bring people to here from all around the world. Why I've invited Joe is I know there's lots of really interesting conversations around the role of data and the way that individuals can start to curate their own experiences and how we use data in the kind of planning of economic and marketing place. So really excited to hear from Joe, maybe not necessarily what we are doing, but what we should be doing. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
So without further ado, I'm going to switch my slides off and introduce our first speaker, which confusingly is not in the order that I've just said, but is in the order of my screen. So it's more my experience rather than yours, but never mind. So I'm going to bring to the table Sam.
Well, thank you very much. I don't like Formula One racing. You didn't need to know that about me, perhaps. But 2 or 3 Christmases ago, both my father-in-law and my stepfather-in-law, we have a very blended family, were staying. And they do like Formula One. And there was some Formula One on the television. I left my phone charging in the room where the TV was on for several hours. They snoozed the Christmas lunch off. The reason I mentioned Formula One is because as they were watching, messages were being picked up by my phone. And for the next 3 months, I think the technical word is bombarded. I was bombarded with ads for all things Formula One until I failed to click on any of them, and slowly that taint went away. Data personalisation, transforming the consumer experience. The internet didn't have necessarily to be primarily a commercial operation, but that's the way we've turned out. And the promise of hyper-personalisation using cookies, although that's going to be stopping soon, the promise of hyper-personalisation was that consumer experience would be transformed. That for companies and brands and organisations and councils, all sorts of organisations, they'd be able, in theory, to serve more relevant, more suitable, less irrelevant ads to individuals. If companies know what you're looking for, what you're listening to, if organisations can understand you better, then they can serve you with more relevant content. That's the theory, at least. That was the promise, at least. I think the reality is something rather different. The reality is one of bombardment, of retargeting, of programmatic, automated retargeting. I have a friend who went from being the head of insight at one of the big media organisations to being an independent consultant. Let's call him Sean. That is indeed his name. Sean was very interested in buying the perfect consultant's briefcase. Perfect consultant's briefcase needs to take a laptop, needs to take papers, needs to take a phone and chargers. And he did some searching and he looked in various different places and he bought one. And it was a fairly high ticket item. You know, he wanted to look like a good consultant, and then for the next 9 months was retargeted, not only by the people he hadn't bought from, but actually the people he had bought from. Time and time again was retargeted with ads for the briefcase he bought and also the briefcase he didn't buy. I co-founded, just around the time of the EU referendum, I co-founded a podcast called the Small Data Forum podcast, very findable in Stitcher and in Apple iTunes. My co-podders and I recorded our 39th episode last Friday. We look at the use of data, big and small, in politics, business, and public life. So you can imagine you record a podcast in these days of since we recorded, we've talked mostly about Trump, Brexit, Cambridge Analytica, and Facebook, although the last 6 episodes have been largely COVID related. The reason I mention that is because we've looked at this issue. We've looked at this issue of bombardment. We've looked at this issue of the effectiveness and otherwise of digital, particularly programmatic technology to enhance, or indeed maybe not to enhance, the customer experience. We also quite often look at and talk about films, and The Great Hack is one film, one Netflix documentary, looking at the work of Carol Cadwallader in particular, all around Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. I don't intend to dig that up. In our most recent episode of the Small Data Forum podcast that went online this morning, we had a debate about The Social Dilemma, another new documentary that has aired recently on Facebook. Which I absolutely loathed. I loathed for a number of reasons, dramatic and otherwise. If you're interested, go and listen to the podcast. It didn't tell us anything particularly new, but it did talk a lot about mass personalization at scale. And I did wonder, because I do a lot of work with marketing econometricians. Those clever people who can tell you, who can answer that age-old question, you know, half of my marketing budget is wasted, I just don't know which half. They can answer that. They can build cause and effect models. That great question, or that great quandary posed by John Wanamaker, the pioneering American supermarket and department store owner. He said, half my marketing budget is wasted, I just don't know which half. Marketing econometricians who, as I say, are able to build cause and effect models of the world, and able to see what marketing investment has worked and what hasn't, they find it very, very difficult to determine the impact of mass personalization of digital marketing investment. I'm talking about display advertising and also increasingly video advertising, advertising that goes alongside YouTube and Facebook videos and so on and so forth. And they find it very hard to identify any impact at all of digital media investment. So digital media investment takes half of all advertising budgets, marketing budgets around the world these days, and they find it very, very hard. And I wondered when I was reviewing this film, The Social Dilemma, whether actually the extraordinary thing about the digital explosion is that it promised more relevant, more targeted, less irrelevant ads. It's taken huge amounts of marketing budgets from small and big advertisers, but maybe it's, you know, the great hack ultimately is that, one, it doesn't work because it's not seen. There's ad fraud, there's bots, there's brand safety issues. But two, it's made some of the most valuable companies on the planet, you know, some of the most valuable companies on the planet in the form of Facebook and Alphabet. Maybe that's the great fraud. I think there was a great promise that the customer experience was going to change, and actually it hasn't changed. It hasn't become more effective, and things are changing again as we move into a cookie-free world. Google doing away with cookies in 2022, GDPR chasing down bad actors in this area. So I think my view is that data personalization hasn't worked so far, and I'll be very, very interested to hear from others with very different perspectives what they feel about mass personalization at scale. That's me.
Thank you, Sam. I love starting with a provocation, possibly a bit of contrary thought, but well evidenced and thought through. Love it. Thank you very much. I think there's a lot of food for thought there already. So I'm now going to hand the reins straight over to Pete Jenkins from Gamification Plus.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks for the invite. I've been looking forward to hearing from the other speakers as well on this one. And Sam, what you were saying really resonated with me. The retargeting particularly, it makes me actually hate buying gifts for people, because you get a random thing for a 3-year-old niece or nephew, and then you're just getting very similar things for the next 3 or 4 months. And it's just, I like relevance, but it's got to be relevant to me, not just to that one-off moment. So it needs to pick up patterns too. Quite interesting. I thought I'd look at a few different uses of data, or even big data, with gamification. I quite like starting with a definition, because what on earth is big data? I like this one. It's an information asset characterized by such a high volume, high velocity and variety to require specific technology and analytical methods to transform it into value. I.e., there's a lot of it coming at you in a high speed, faster than you can handle, and in lots of different ways. And what's gamification? It's the process of making activities more game-like. And we do this to change people's behaviors. So we might get them to do more or less of something, like be more productive, increase customer loyalty, or make more sustainable purchasing decisions. I think there's 4 key areas I see gamification interacting with data. The first one, and I'm going to move towards the customer experience side as we go through these. The first one is about using games to crowdsource data analysis. So when there's so much data, it gets too hard to analyze. The famous example of this was Foldit in the US, which was a bunch of AIDS researchers trying to solve a protein folding issue. And then with some colleagues, they created a game. And after, I think it was 12 years, they've been trying to solve this protein folding issue. And then after they got 14,000 players to play the game, they'd solved it within 10 days. Which is kind of like, so using the crowd to analyze the data. The same platform helped come up with a vaccine for Ebola a couple of years ago in the last outbreak in the Congo. Homegrown, there's a good one from Cancer Research, Genes in Space. Not that you can play it anymore because it's finished, but it was an app helping scientists find faults in DNA within people that could lead to cancer. So the space adventure game analyzed the data as you navigated outer space obstacles, which actually was the DNA sequence of people. Okay, so every time you steered your spacecraft, patterns in the gene data which correspond to gene faults were recorded. And this is used to use and develop new drugs to target these faults. Okay, what's cool about it is over 400,000 people volunteered worldwide to contribute to this by playing it. And consequently, the entire genomes of 1,980 patients were analyzed and checked 50 times for accuracy. And there's more out there. EVE Online generally has something going on. They did one originally which had their players, this is the game EVE Online, had their players submitting more than 13 million classifications of human cells. Now they have a hunt for exoplanets. So we're all helping do that if we're playing. So that's the first one of the 4. The second one is actually my favorite and kind of how I got into gamification, which is how we use gamification to actually generate more data. Okay, because sometimes we don't have enough. I like to think, I'll start with a simple one, which is like LinkedIn. They have various gamification features that make you want to complete your profile. Yeah, everywhere I worked, my academic history, that sort of thing. So you get an all-star round circle filled these days. So that's obviously what they want to get out of it, is accurate data. I got into it through CRM's, customer relationship management systems. So where we were using gamification to get the salespeople to ask more questions of the customers so they could add more accurate data in and basically increase the accuracy of sales funnels. So can we improve the prediction of when we're going to make sales, how far things are through the sales funnel? And the gamification there is benefiting the salespeople, but also making it fun to go and actually get that data. I've got a client called Save Water, Save Money. There we actually use a game to get people to submit more data. So there's a prediction game. If you go through this platform, we want you to use less water in the long run. And so we get people to predict how much water they'll be using in a year's time if they do various water saving efforts. And there's some interesting things about why that works as a game. But the main thing is to make that accurate and to play the game, they have to submit more data on what household items they have and their water usage patterns. So we're earning that data, getting that data from them. It's getting to the point where it's now a whole industry. Gamification in market research builds lots of games that you play with your customers or potential customers to learn about them. So you might design an avatar or complete an avatar in a game, and the items you select are actually telling us about you. So it's a fun way to learn about you. Or you might be experiencing a simulation of what it might be like to work with a massive company, you know, as a provider in a few years' time, and what would that look like? And they're actually asking and answering how you would interact with them. What would breakfast look like with Vodafone in 10 years' time, or something like that? There's a great book on the subject, actually, called Games and Gamification in Market Research, which I highly recommend, from Betty Adamu, because it's its own industry. And what Sam was saying about targeted ads maybe reminded me about one of the companies we work with called 3 Radical, who work a lot in the marketing side of things. And they use games to earn, to get people to put data in, to get more plays of the game or whatever. And they call the concept earned data. So you're earning data from your prospective customers or actual customers through engaging with them in fun and interactive ways. And then, of course, they're making their marketing approaches and communications more relevant based on the data that you've earned from. Okay? So they've been using that with things like ZZ's restaurant chain and so on. So there's a lot of examples out there. So that's where I came into gamification. The third idea, which I really like, and is actually one of the reasons I started importing a gamified CRM in the first place 8 years ago, was that we can use games and gamification to understand the data better. The big data visualization software segment is the fastest growing segment of the big data industry. And this is basically related to demands for visuals to represent and interpret analyzed data. That sounds quite complicated, but actually games are really good at displaying visually lots and lots of data on one screen, for instance. Yeah, so I mean, my favorite game ever was Civilization, a strategy game. On one screen and in map format, so it makes sense to you, there's an awful lot of data showing up. There's like 40 different data sets, and it makes sense as where I'm going to access and what I'm going to look at next. It just puts tons of information readily to hand and makes us work out easily what we need to look at. Whereas I find with reports on data, people stare at a report and go, I don't really know what I'm looking at here. What am I after? Yeah, so a game actually highlights from data what we can do with it. The fourth one is what the main subject here, which is that we can use this data to personalize experiences. I mean, even 4 years ago, they reckoned that the 2 billion gamers on the planet were producing 50 terabytes of data every day. It's a lot of data. And what we can do with that data in the games industry is update the game according to what is working well. Okay, so what we're aiming for in games quite often is to make a game just challenging enough. And we need to know a lot about you individually to give you a challenge that's just the right level of difficulty. So there's a game called Left 4 Dead by Valve, and it used a bit of AI or machine learning to generate encounters for players at a pace and in places that it judged most effective to ratchet up the tension and improve the multiplayer dynamics. Okay, so everyone's getting a different experience now. In fact, what we might see soon in the future is these sort of optimizations made around narrative and engagement. So if a game might detect which bits of the storyline you most enjoy and give you more narrative around that. So maybe I've got a favorite character. It's going to take me off that way, and it's going to be able to judge that. This is a massive in the games industry. And what I like about it is they're doing it already. So we're getting mass personalized experiences, making things more engaging. In fact, it's really big business within the online learning industry now. Nearly all my inquiries in the past couple of months have been around leveling up online learning platforms and training programs. And they've all worked out that they need to personalize and individualize the experience for each learner because everyone wants to get something else out of it. And it's doable, is it? how practical is it to have personalized experiences through data and gamification? I was thinking about this, even in my small company, everyone who has worked for me all likes different types of game. So to think we would enjoy or engage in a particular experience exactly the same way would be madness. So I think we have to think about how to personalize every experience. It's becoming possible through machine learning and AI. We're learning more about how people play. We can offer them more relevant experiences. And the more relevant we make a game to a particular person, the more engaged they're going to be and the more effective the customer loyalty program, the training, the brand building, the brand experience, whatever it is, the more effective that's going to be. So I think we should be personalizing, and I think the technology is almost there. And I'm going to end on that bit because I'm excited about what we can do with data.
Fantastic, Pete. Thank you very much. Lots of thoughts and responses to that going through my head. Certainly, I'm sure everybody else's. But I'm going to whiz on to Joe, and then we can unpick that in more detail in a minute. So, Joe Williams, over to you.
Hi there, thanks for letting me join this techie world, which is quite exciting. I really am a tourism person. I've been working in tourism for the last 30 years, and 20 years ago, in the dark ages, I was a direct marketing manager when email marketing was really just coming to its own, and sort of very much about the role of data in marketing, customer loyalty, customer lifetime value. And then really technology came in and sort of threw everything up in the air for travel and tourism. And now it's sort of really leading the way in terms of distribution, product development. I think it's about the whole customer journey and experience from when people come into different touch points and you start looking at websites, looking for a destination you want to go to, what's the experience, all the way through to your journey where you might be within a destination and, you know, you're walking around and you're getting messages pinged to your mobile saying, oh, you've got a voucher off for a cup of coffee, you know, that kind of destination personalization and use of data and technology is really exciting. I think, you know, there's the obvious role for data and personalization in marketing, for destination, and also for the whole tourism and travel sector in terms of airlines, large hotel chains with customer loyalty schemes. They really use this to do this. The online travel agencies such as Expedia, Airbnb, TripAdvisor, you know, this whole area is collecting data. I don't think it's quite there yet in terms of the Amazon, Alexa. I mean, I sometimes feel, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel I've just thought something and then something pops up in my Amazon recommendations. I'm like, how the hell did that get there? But certainly, you know, the prospects for increased data and personalization for travel and tourism and destination is huge. And I think, you know, there's lots of people on that spectrum of where they're at, depending on the size, level, resources that they've got. For tourism in terms of destinations, I think the data it's not just marketing, it's product development, it's transport needs, it's making sure we've got the infrastructure. So all of this data can really feed into that. And it also helps in terms of visitors, you know, who are they? What are they going to spend? Who do we want to come down? Where are they going to go? What season do they arrive? You know, the biggest discussion right now with COVID and tourism is how are we going to support these businesses through the winter season? I mean, they've had a shocking short summer season. How can we target and really reach people to come to West Sussex now for the break they need in this kind of COVID area? And I think there's lots of things to unpick there. I think with tourism, as I said, distribution is a really key element now. And there's a lot of work by Visit Britain to try and get a national distribution system where businesses can go onto that, called TXGB, a really sort of exciting project. Unfortunately, I think sort of COVID came in and it's taken up a lot of the space by resource and businesses, but it's one that, you know, is a possible way to help the destination grow and reach the markets they need. And it also, I think, as Pete was saying, you know, it's also giving back data as well. So there's lots of different roles. So just a couple of things for me. One is, just also want to touch base. I just literally, before I came on this call, had a call from a business. One of our most brilliant experiences, cookery school, up the road from Brighton in Stenning. They don't even have broadband. Their connection is so appalling. They don't have a mobile system. So, you know, whilst we're here forward thinking and having this amazing discussion, I think for Sussex and parts of Sussex, it's still an issue that actually people don't have access to some of the infrastructure and the hardware. And they've not been able to create a virtual baking school, which was keeping them going through COVID. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there because it came up literally before I came online. I think some of the things stopping some of these amazing opportunities that data and personalisation can bring to travel is, again, it's been mentioned, is certainly GDPR. I think the wariness and the trust factor, and certainly when you've got destinations managed possibly with local authorities, which is the case of Sussex, there's, you know, very aware of the risks around sort of data and use and breach. Resource, a massive one. So, you know, I think some of the things we're talking about here are so exciting, and certainly, you know, the airlines and the large hotel chains will have decent resource to put into this. I think some of the destinations, a bit of a mix, and certainly West Sussex, this is something I'd love to push more, but it's about budget and also staff resource and know-how and expertise as well. I mean, it's fantastic listening to you guys. The other thing I think is trust. Again, for tourism, you know, as I was saying, a lot of things have gone online, distribution. We all heard about sort of the COVID, but tourism at the end of the day is a service industry. And when it comes down to it, it's about people and the ability for someone who's booked this amazing holiday, or everything's online, all goes wrong, actually they can't get hold of anybody. Now, chatbots are brilliant, but at the end of the day, if there's no one there taking a call or doing something, it's really difficult. And I think that aspect for COVID in this situation, not saying we'll have put the brakes on, but I think, you know, it's broken that trust in this sort of technological world of travel. You know, people want their money back, people want to change things. Travel is sometimes quite a complicated transaction. It's not just want to buy, you know, a rubber stamp on Amazon or something. It's multi-partner, multi-purpose, longer term. So I think that's one of the issues. And then just really to give you an example of something that was done recently with London and partners, like the main sort of group of people in London running all the tourism businesses up there, Airbnb, Visa, London Heathrow, all got together, used a trusted partner or a trusted third party to host all their data and stack it up and analyze it, and really pull out what they could look at in terms of spend, travel motivations, what they were doing, where they were going, which is phenomenal. But, you know, listening to the challenges of putting that together, and it just actually provided a snapshot. It was kind of just a one-off. And actually, really what we're talking about is we'd love to see trends and ongoing processes. And some of the challenges, I think, was about trust between the partners, you know, who's going to hold the data, and also, what are you going to do with it? You know, it's got to be, I think we're talking about, like, it's amazing having this reams of data, but actually, what are you going to do with what you find out? So yeah, a lot to talk about, a lot of tourism, the customer journey, the exciting things like VR can really, you know, put a destination virtually online, give people a taste pre and post. personalisation, and getting people to come back to your destination, you know, the loyalty factor. So yeah, I think, you know, I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the discussions today, and seeing if there's any opportunities that West Sussex and Sussex wide actually can take forward in a meaningful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. A great succinct introduction to the world of tourism there, but also some really important points to make around that knowledge sharing and how we target that expertise, particularly at the moment when we are thinking very seriously about economic disruption. So I'd like to definitely explore some of those points later. Thank you very much. So now over to Karen, Professor Karen Cham.
Hiya. I think that's really interesting, actually, a lot of what Jo was just saying. I do need to segue into my presentation from that, because my presentation is about what goes on inside digital experiences. But suffice to say that what's most important is what you can and can't put into code. And there's a lot in and around the experience economy that cannot be digitally transformed very successfully into code. And I think, Jo, you must meet better chatbots than I do, because I've not met any good ones at all. They tend to be quite moronic in my experience. So I think we're very blessed in this situation to have access to loads of technology, but the question is always, what do we do about it in a qualitative sense to improve people's experience? So I'm going to screen share and do a PowerPoint, only because I think better in slides than I do in notes. So it seemed like the easiest thing to do. Just bear with me while I fiddle around with all these malarkey. Okay, share. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, fantastic. Professor of what is it? Lovely. Okay, so I wanted to do a bit of a discussion. I hope I've a bit of a discussion about human-machine convergence, and I hope I've explained it quite simply in response to what Jo was saying about what we can and can't put into technological context, what we can and can't put into code. But I quite like this diagram, the implication that we're going to go from our phones to wearables to augmentation to a form of extended reality. And we can only imagine from our chatbot experiences how poor this might be if we don't do it well. So yeah, for me, personalisation generally in technological terms is about data-driven nudge. It's about systems that scrape information about what you've done before and about what other people have done before and suggest things to you in a really simple way. Sometimes it works quite well. People who bought these shoes bought the other shoes, or they bought this bag, or they bought this cardigan and all the rest of it. And we sort of expect it now. But I think what we don't consider is that the richer the personalisation, the more data is being scraped about our behaviour. So I think even though people want privacy, I think if you said now, right, okay, well, switch off this, this and this, and you logged back into Amazon and it was anybody's history and anybody's feed and anybody's junk, I think you'd find it frustrating. I think you would want to switch it all back on again. So we're in a little bit of a conundrum, really. And I wanted to flag up a book from 1999, if anyone likes a read, seeing as we've got nothing else to do till March. A book called Posthumanism by Catherine N. Hales. And she was talking in 1999 about the possibility of downloading human consciousness into a computer. And at the time, this was really radical and very left field, and it wasn't taken very seriously, generally speaking. But of course, if we look at it from this point of view, we have effectively downloaded our consciousness into a computer, and we do so at all times. We even do so when we're asleep, if we're using a wearable that's monitoring our sleep, although it doesn't monitor sleep. A lot of the time it monitors movement. But nonetheless, we're creating a kind of data exoskeleton. And there's a paper available online that I gave in 2011, if you are interested, talking about the notion of an architecture and an image and a trace that we leave behind, which is effectively now what we'd call a digital twin. But instead of being a digital twin for manufacturing, this is a digital twin of us, our personalised exoskeleton, all the marks and traces that we leave across our devices. Now, in the commercial environment, which actually Sam pointed out, cookies and programmatic advertising, as it's correctly known, doesn't do a great job. You are always deluged after you've, it continues throwing things at you ages after you've committed to purchase. But within certain closed systems, behavioural analytics does a very good job of scraping your data, of gamifying your experience, of giving increased personalisation. And tools like OkCupid, they're actually engineered not to create a healthy human relationship, surprise, surprise, but to create a dopamine addiction to the system. So we're in a very deep relationship with a lot of tools in a response to data being scraped about what we think and feel and do that we probably don't even realise at this stage. Now, a great example, and I promise I won't go on. The kids always go, "Mum, we don't need a lecture." So I won't go on too long. But a great example from a few years ago, I was working with eBay, and this was about 2013. And they told me that in Northern Europe and Germany, they had to run eBay more slowly than they ran it in the UK, because the Scandinavians and the Germans need to feel that they've achieved something, and the Brits just want it to be quick. So there are massive cultural data insights from these platforms. For example, at that time, eBay went live to 6 million users at any given moment across Europe, Middle East, and Asia. So this isn't even global, and it's 7 years ago. So you can imagine the amount of collective data insights. And don't forget, this is going from macro across Europe, Middle East, and Asia, right down to micro and your IP address and what you're doing at any given moment. So another common arena for scraping data is sentiment analysis. And this can come from your social media feeds. It can come from closed systems in enterprise architectures, but it's not uncommon for a machine to be scraping natural language programming insights, 3-word clusters about how people are thinking and feeling and responding live to whatever they're consuming. No one's going to sleep tonight, are they? I think Sam says he's talked an awful lot about all this already. So I was thinking when you opened up, Sam, I was thinking, oh, he's going to say everything I'm going to say. But we know we have a lot in common, don't we? Anyway, the Cambridge Analytica scandal. A lot of Facebook profiles were harvested, and it was used really for a commercial and a political aim by a commercial organisation. But effectively, it's the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which was about extreme hyper-personalisation, engineering political outcomes, and I'll go back to it in a minute, is really just advertising, propaganda and fake news. It's nothing new. It's nothing more terrifying than these things have always been terrifying. So whilst we need to be conscious and aware and concerned about our privacy, I think it's important not to be frightened of robots, because it's the same old, same old. It's human beings. Now, I gave another paper, and actually I don't get paid for you reading any of this, but just because I'm an obsessive referencer, in 2014 in Havana, and I described how user experience methodologies could have been used to engineer the Arab Spring right across social media. And I ended on suggesting that we don't know who it might be, who may have wanted to engineer the Arab Spring, but I did make a point that I was suggesting who it might be in Havana. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. So we'll just think about that for a moment. It was technically possible, not to take away the power of the people, but the internet is not an open, level playing field. It's a data-rich environment with a lot of powerful stakeholders. So these are some of the adverts that I didn't see that made it into personal feeds as part of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the Brexit campaign. I am not xenophobic. I don't use social media either. I do use LinkedIn, and you'll probably, if you follow me, know that I'm a bit of a lefty, because sometimes I do reveal my feelings, and I didn't used to. I used to be very fastidious because I don't want that information scraping, but you won't find anything personal about me anywhere, and that's on purpose. Now, if the people running this campaign scraped information to suggest I was xenophobic, these are the types of adverts I would have seen in the run-up to the Brexit vote, which is actually leveraging xenophobia, if not racism. I don't feel like that about people from Albania, Macedonia. My niece is half Turkish. I don't have my head in my hands about people from those areas joining the EU, but this is a targeted nudge for people where sentiment analysis has described a degree of xenophobia. These are the type of adverts that were being pushed to nudge people, to leverage fear. So we've got a problem. We don't know what's fake news. We don't know what's fact. So I won't go on about it, but it is really a battle for provenance, epistemology and ideology. And we need to account for what we're doing when we're using data to nudge, persuade and coerce. And I think I shall leave it at that, if that's okay.
You can't stop at a point where I'm trying to spell epistemology on my notebook.
It did go on further, but I'm not, it's a bit much. I think it's enough. I think it's enough for the moment.
I was mid bad spelling there, because I was thinking, oh, I must jot that down.
Provenance is where something comes from. Epistemology is different types of knowledge, and ideology is what you believe and value. And there are different ideologies, like the Germans who want things to be achieved. You know, that we can tell from the flat pack furniture that the Swedes like a challenge, can't we?
Absolutely.
There's an ideological frame within which we're working.
So thank you for that, Karen. Obviously, again, hugely fascinating. And to all of you, I think, as I'd hoped, different takes of the same subject, and just to show how complex and interesting and uncertain a lot of it is as well. So now I'm really keen to dig in a little bit. So please, those of you who have been diligently listening in, now's your chance to fire up your questions, pop them in the chat bar, or we will bring you in to speak directly in a moment. But maybe starting at the end and then kind of working backwards a little bit, then this idea of fear and personalisation. Do we really have a grasp on how much, you talked about power, you know, within the internet there are, you know, people who have, there's a very concentrated, very powerful set of people who understand the enormous implications of what data scraping at scale can do. I don't know them. I don't know where they live. I don't know who they are. I don't know how to access them. But I read in The Guardian, you know, last week that Russian data scrapers and fake news spreaders are actively right now working on the US election and ensuring that certain people see certain things across the US. We know that's happening right now. And I read that and I go, that's a bit scary. But I feel so completely powerless to do anything about it. It's too big for me to even properly comprehend. But that is democracy being actively disrupted. And it feels like we're kind of a little bit lethargic about it. There's nobody's seeking to really, doesn't feel like anyone's seeking to do anything. So should we be more scared than we are, Karen?
Well, I don't think we should be scared. That wouldn't help anything. I think we need to be educated and aware and proactive. I think the problem is that the speed of technological innovation is ahead of policy. To be frank, that's the problem, that policy is trying to close the door after the horse has bolted. But without, I know we're supposed to be talking about customer experiences, but it kind of is all the same thing because it's about persuasion. Yeah. Democracy's always been hijacked. Democracy's always been leveraged. People have always been rabble-roused. There's always been leaders and competition for people's loyalty. So it's not new. It's not different. It might be in a new format, which we feel is out of our control. But, you know, the internet is an open network drive. So the notion of publishing anything on an open network drive about yourself, it should be a very aware decision. I mean, we might get to a point where all the social media feeds get scraped. We already got the right to be forgotten. You know, we can't carry on the way that we have been carrying on. It's not tenable, you know. No one will get a job because everyone was a naughty teenager, for example. You know, that kind of thing.
I think you're quite right, Karen, that it's always been thus. One of my Yeah, favourite recent series is a series called The Americans, which is about a husband and wife, Russian couple living in Reagan-era America, running a travel agency, not doing any digital marketing at all, but running a travel agency as a front, and it tells a lot of their backstory, and it demonstrates how they were actively subverting American politics. And you think of, Lord Haw in the Second World War, if your memory or your cultural knowledge goes that far back. You think of dropping of leaflets out of planes in order to get people to surrender. I think what people find scary, I guess, or what people can find intimidating, and I completely agree, Karen, that we shouldn't be scared, we should be aware, absolutely. What people find scary is that it leaves a permanent trace, and you do leave this permanent trace. And much so I didn't enjoy that Social Dilemma movie. It dramatizes quite well. It dramatizes quite well what the consequences of that are, and they are real. And it's a very old comment that if the product is free, if the service is free, then you are the product. That's not an original thought, and it's that they rather spouted on that movie as if it is. And I read a very interesting book recently that I'm going to show you. Here it is, Angrynomics. Very interesting book. It talks about I'm standing next to my bookshelves. Talks about the cyclical nature of anger arriving in capitalist societies when both the software and probably the hardware needs a bit of a reboot. And the argument is, you can look back into you can look back into the oil crisis in the 70s. You can look back into the Great Depression. You can see what was done to reset. But one of the things that they talk about, and I'd be really interested, Karen, from your perspective, and also all the other panelists' perspective, one of the things they talk about is maybe having not a windfall tax, but having a data dividend, because the FANG 5, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google have acquired. Well, maybe Amazon and Netflix haven't, but certainly Facebook and Alphabet have acquired data about us and everything that we do, and the great profiles that everyone's been talking about that we can build. They've acquired them free, and one of the and we've voluntarily given that over because we've got access to this service. We can have the great Gmail service, all of these different things. One of the suggestions for the reset is actually that, and this I guess is going to have to be done at a supranational level, but that these corporations should make a contribution to the societies whose data they take, and that should be quite a large financial contribution. I just wonder if others think that's an intelligent way to go.
I've definitely been, everything I've been working on is about giving people the chance to trade the data. So you either opt in because it's, I gave a paper to the Institute of Engineering Technologists actually called Digital Transformation of a Pandemic last week. And just suggesting how it could have been done better than an undergraduate project anyway. But the option would be to share your data with the NHS. I would happily consent to sharing my data so the NHS can look at comorbidities. There are other ecosystems where you could trade your data without question. And Jo does know all about this because she's got a background in marketing. It's effectively green shield stamps, isn't it, Jo? So there are lots of opportunities, but NHS data belongs to us because it's taxpayers funded. BBC data belongs to us because it's taxpayer funded. So there's an issue in this country about recognizing where data ownership lies. Actually, I think that's the main thing, who owns the data, and different countries, different ideological contexts will give you different answers.
Yeah.
Just on the internationality, because obviously that does impact on the travel and marketing, and but also just different societies and the levels they're at. I was based in Myanmar for 5 years when it was opening up. And, the phrase we heard at every single event was leapfrogging, because they went from absolutely nothing, no technology, no handsets, no devices, no infrastructure, to, I think, I don't know, in 2 or 3 years, massive percentage with mobile phones, you know, mobile tech devices. And actually, I think on the negative side, talking about some of the fear stuff, is it played a massive part in hate speech around, you know, some of the atrocities that happened. And I think for me, it was fast. It reached people which never before, and they were a population really that were not savvy about, you know, democracy and about what was going on. So, you know, they read of Facebook. Basically, Facebook was their access to the internet. It wasn't Google. You don't have internet as a browser. It was everything is Facebook. And now actually I'm loath to kind of lose Facebook because I have so many links with people that I don't want to lose. But yeah, I think it's interesting, the evolution. But on the positive side, I saw the benefits in terms of the ease where smaller, basically mum and dad travel businesses or experiences, it's canoeing on a lake, really reliant on this income.
Yeah.
Very easy platform to reach people, to market, to effectively get their messaging out. So I think it's a real challenge, isn't it? You've got your data.
It wouldn't be difficult to say. It wouldn't be difficult, would it, to suggest that, yeah, it's a great use for small businesses to drum up customers. It's not a great use for rigging elections.
Yeah. So who you know manages that, and who's got the teeth and the ability? And I don't think necessarily the UK government managed to get much out of Facebook on some of their issues, did they? But yeah, you know, I think in terms of travel, and also the issue we were talking about international, is this data protection, data ownership. If you're sort of looking at marketing overseas or collecting data from India, America, it's the complication of the legalities around the data. I think in terms of travel and marketing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I always think it's an amazing statistic. You know, you think of, and particularly Facebook and Google. Facebook, Google, Amazon, I guess, you know, they account for something like, in terms of advertising, revenue, display and video advertising, something like 75 to 80% globally of a $250, $300 billion market. So, you know, they do very well. About 3/4 of that comes from, let's call them mom and pop enterprises. Most of the revenue doesn't come from the big global brands. Most of them comes from, they don't exist, but Worthing windsurfers. You know, that's where the revenue comes from. But because it's you know, it's the law of, you know, so many businesses doing a little bit of advertising, creating these enormous businesses, which, as you say, can then be hijacked and used. I you know, entirely see that clear line between. You know, I read quite a lot about East Germany, and I've been reading quite a lot about the, you know, the operations of the Stasi. And it feels incredibly kind of pedestrian because there's all of these records that are kind of hand kept. Now, of course, all of these records are instantly available. And Cambridge Analytica, with that, as you were talking about, Karen, Cambridge Analytica were able to look at the dimensions of personality and then serve those targeted ads in a way that just reinforced prejudice.
It is, to be frank, isn't it? It's the speed, the scale, the incremental detail, and yet the massive patterns and the automation. That's what makes everybody kind of freaked out about it. Yeah. You know, without wanting to worry everybody, there are dimensions to data-driven experiences of all kinds that are particular to that, and not anything that came before. Yeah, interesting times.
So given all the examples that we had at the start there, from the gamification examples that I think were really interesting, Sam's examples, Karen's and Joe's, a big question here. But if there's a ratio of balance at the moment, who is benefiting most from data personalization? Is it the consumer, or is it the one trying to persuade or sell at the moment? Because it's pitched as a you know, something that's going to make our lives better. You know, that's what it's sold as. Obviously, it's about enhancing experiences. It's about ensuring we don't get the crap that we don't like anymore. It's stuff that's useful to us. It means we can get from A to B quicker. It means our lives are lived smarter. It means we can earn more money because we have more time. All these kinds of things. But is that maybe picking up from what you suggested earlier, Sam, is it a big lie, or are we better off for it?
I think, well, I'll do, because since you drove that, I mean, I think all of us are better off, and many of us are worse off simultaneously. I don't think that those are. I mean, you know, that definition of madness, holding mutually contradictory thoughts at the same time. The thing that certain presidents and prime ministers are incredibly good at doing, holding mutually contradictory thoughts at the same time. So I'm not a Luddite. I'm definitely not a Luddite. I do think that we are all better off for the existence of technologies. I think that the fact that they exist in a supranational, apparently untaxable, often unreachable businesses, and the hands of a very few, okay, they're publicly traded organizations, I think that makes it a challenge. And I think the fact that it is, you know, like anything, it is hijackable. It is, you know, that means that, I mean, I guess my response would be a question. We can't turn it back. So how are we going to effectively be able to regulate something that appears to be unregulatable?
I think, sorry, I was just, sorry, do go on.
No.
Oh, it was just the notion of it being unregulatable. I mean, there's an oxymoron, isn't there? Because we are leaving a permanent trace, but that means everything that's going on is measurable, it's trackable. We can prove it. So that it's kind of it's a threat and an opportunity at the same time, because nothing can be done in a digital environment that can be erased. So that means the persuasion, the coercion, the, you know, the hacking, the whatever, the grooming, everything leaves a trace. So that's kind of a risk and an opportunity. That's all I was going to say.
I think that you're all right with the balance part of it, in that some big companies have got too much. And I think individually we're quite good when we're relating to a brand or whatever about deciding what information we want to give them in exchange for our data. Yeah, so what we get from them in exchange for our data. The issue is those bits we're not aware of where they're taking our data. And I wonder if it's the fact that big business can do it so much better. Is there actually a way we can use technology to empower smaller businesses, smaller organizations to do that conversation with us better? So then it balances out all that unfortunate data accumulation from these few big organizations.
Or not even with a commercial application. You know, a lot of the conversation this morning and in past Driver events is, you know, this immense knowledge in the commercial sector, you know, even a fraction of it being put into public service design, and to be able to, you know, would solve so many of the infrastructural challenges that we have about distribution of food, of NHS waiting times, all these kind of things.
There is a job being advertised at the moment for the head of digital transformation at the government.
Well, Dominic Cummings, for all his faults, does seem to be pretty keen on this stuff being brought into the civil service.
Because he owns shares in data.
Well, indeed. So I did say for all his faults, and including his faults. This isn't a political point. Obviously, there's vested interest, but in terms of changing the thinking around public service design, and you know, maybe that comes to the sort of destination management,
yeah,
and the, you know, and placemaking particularly. Joe, you know, you know, your point about the digital divide and certain, you know, certainly businesses, rural businesses, but also, you know, people who just don't have the digital connectivity at home, and this past few weeks has brought that into very sharp relief. I chaired a webinar with Aging 2.0 all around the kind of transformation in the lives of over 80s recently. You know, we've seen that it's gone from 20% to 66% of over 80s having at least one sort of video call per week. You know, that even that small change is quite remarkable. But of course, they are not the target for all of this stuff that we're talking about, as are, you know, not many other people. So it's a kind of narrower and narrower pool of people perhaps that are being targeted here. but you gave an example of a business that wants to be part of this. They want their cooking school to be part of the algorithms. They want to be popping up in people's ad feeds. They want people to see them over someone else if they like making bread at home, you know. So, you know, from your perspective, what's needed? What's needed for knowledge exchange in a kind of placemaking approach to ensure that all of this expertise that we've got can have a slightly more bigger picture result?
I think there's lots of different layers. I think you're absolutely right in the terms of digital divide. I think we shouldn't forget, the people who don't have the broadband access, but the younger audiences, the TikTok gang, as I like to call them, because my daughter's one. But a lot of, you know, kids we've seen during schooling, the sort of 16, 18-year-olds don't have their own access to some of this. In terms of a sort of more commercial aspect, what I would love to see, and again, I think it's around sort of GDPR and trust and worries around that, but is the coming together. How do we bring a lot of the people with the commercial data, whether it's the airlines, the airports, the accommodation, the visas, the MasterCards, transport, and sort of, I guess, find the resource and the trusted third parties who could bring all of this sort of data together, and then sort of the analysis of it, really. And it's that nexus is also between kind of the experts, if you like, in the tourism, destination, travel world, the sort of technology world, and the people who can sit in between and translate what's going on. And you know, maybe that's where sort of gamification comes in as well, is sort of simplifying and making all this data kind of accessible. You know, you can imagine a sort of a whole area on the screen where you're like, oh my God, like the French are going up, the Germans going down, you know, how can we get this market coming at Christmas? You know, the sort of dashboard effect. But to sort of populate that data, you're kind of relying on so many different partners and lots of trust and relationship and resource to make that happen. You know, and I think also the gamification side is interesting in itself, in terms of actually, you know, we're talking at the moment about online gaming, and the whole product is becoming a customer experience in itself. And I'm sure that's a whole world that I try not to get into. I used to love Pac-Man many years ago, and after that I don't really want my kids to get into Xbox, and as amazing as they are. But you know, that's a whole new world of digital user experience that translates between the technology and also the personal, and supports the tourism destination. You know, I just think a lot of this thought and thinking is really exciting. But how can we, I guess, access it in terms of resource and funding, and getting those visions? You know, sometimes when we're talking about politics earlier on, whether it's national, central, regional, it's quite often a political lifetime that we're talking about some programs. Very rarely, as we realize in climate change, do people are looking at 30 years ahead. You know, how can we get some of this visionary stuff in place and funded from the kind of the local authorities who are sort of politically, you know, run, which requires some of this resource. It's not just a 2-3 year project, it's a longer term vision, really.
I think there are, there's lots of things afoot where people want to create open data warehouses and platforms and data sharing. And I think at this point, I do have to plug the DRIVA project itself, because we're providing access to Gatwick's data feed. We've got a training program running at the moment, if you look on the website under opportunities. And because there are large organisations such as Gatwick who don't have they're not a digital first organisation, so they have data lakes. So they're not doing all this incredible personalisation. They're running an airport, you know. So there are big organisations who want to collaborate to release value from the data. And also things like under 5G, there's been discussions about leaving certain amount of the bandwidth open for community use. Yeah. So you could, for example, say, when you come to West Sussex, you're in a data safe place, will only use it to enhance the quality of your experience and will wipe it when you leave. I mean, these things will start to become really attractive, I think, to consumers.
Yeah. They're really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the frustrations is a lot of the knowledge and technology is already available to bigger business. Okay, so it's out there. It's a question of scale and affordability.
Yeah.
So the sort of idea that just occurred to me for Joe and that sort of things is to take like BIDs or business improvement districts and create versions that are like add another D, business improvement digital district.
Yeah.
So a conglomeration of people that just focused on doing all this well online. Yeah. So taking, for instance, Joe's ideas around geographic personalization. I know a platform that already does that. Yeah, and it's like $3 or $4 grand a month. So a small business can't afford it, but perhaps a load together could. And then you've got the West Sussex geographical targeted stuff.
Well, a local authority could, Pete, theoretically, a tourism visit Britain or whatever. You know, it's starting to think very much about what Richard said, which was a brilliant steer on knowledge exchange in and around placemaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good fit for this and about doing that sort of scale.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to say, based on that conversation, so about 4 weeks ago, one of the political parties approached me about gamifying the next London mayoral elections and elements of it. So it's on the radar, definitely. And they were looking at all sorts of different aspects of it, from motivating door-to-door canvassers to getting people to experience the effect of their policies in the future. Like, imagine taking part in a simulation of what it would look like if that policy was in place, and some other fundraising stuff and things like that.
You've tantalisingly said.
I'm not going to say who it was, but
no, you said they approached you, not that you're doing it. So noted.
Not doing it.
I just want to remind all of you listening and watching in, please do put questions in the chat bar or just ping up your camera and we'll invite you to join in. There was a question earlier from Andreas. I didn't read it because I realised he had to pop off, and it's probably completely unanswerable, but I'm going to, out of fairness, ask it anyway in case one of you has a really insightful response. When is enough data? Where is the limit?
It's infinite.
That's what I thought.
It's very hard.
Language.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about particular industry niches. I'm aware of a bunch of companies that do gamified psychometric testing for recruitment.
Yeah.
And within 7 to 10 minutes, they'll gather 14,000 data points so that they can accurately assess you. That's 14,000 data points. Quite often when we're thinking about data, we're thinking like, oh, I gave them my address and just a few data points. But there's so much more. It's a huge lake of information. But there needs to be a lot in order to do this personalization on 8 billion people in the world. If I want to employ the right one, I need a lot of information.
So I'm data naive. You know, it probably horrifies Karen, who you said earlier you're pretty much untraceable on the internet apart from your academic papers. No, I'm almost certainly the opposite. And if you wanted to know, you know, what I had for breakfast, you could probably find it out. But you know, I don't have that. I've deliberately not watched all the documentaries that Sam poo-pooed earlier. Just, you know, I couldn't bear it. I'm one of those people. I want a data dashboard for every part of my life. You know, when I look at my accounting software, when I run my business, that is just the most beautiful piece of information on a screen that tells me what's coming in, what's going out, what I owe, what people owe me, when, how. It goes into huge kind of granular detail and it's in bright big colours. Now I want one of those that tells me what my children are thinking and feeling and what they're doing and when they last had a wash. I want something that tells me, you know, when the bins are full and to put them out. I want a dashboard for every single aspect of my life, and I want one now. What's stopping it? What's stopping that happening? Or is it on its way?
Everybody?
Open to everybody.
I've got one aspect of it, because I've been avoiding it for years, but I got fascinated by the world of cryptocurrencies and crypto blockchain, the works. And what's really interesting is basically once you've got one bit of information about someone, everything's linked. So you might log into a wallet, a crypto wallet, and you'll just log in using your wallet as a way of doing it, and then it will show in this new platform all your assets, even though you've just used this as a login, because they can do that. And it basically becomes a digital dashboard for your investments. And then later it'll be a digital dashboard for lending and borrowing, which is the latest thing that's going on in there. And then why not a similar one for travel? And suddenly you've got all these different things. And I think we're seeing exactly what you're asking about happen in the crypto world at the moment, in the blockchain world. So it's coming, and it's trustless and it's decentralized, and there's an element of it that's taking out the big players. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested.
I don't know, the Financial Conduct Authority's released a new trench of legislation quite recently around crypto. So it's creeping up. I think you've highlighted something really important, Richard, because I'm a bit like that myself. I wouldn't mind a dashboard on everything, even though I'm simultaneously a privacy freak. So that highlights the dilemma around personalisation, doesn't it? That we want these things to be automated and actionable and personalised and immediate. But in the same breath, we're kind of terrified about what might be going on in the background.
Hi, Bonamy.
I've got a visitor.
Hiya.
Welcome,
It
welcome.
felt a bit weird when it's getting smaller to be faceless. So, but I think yeah, it sort of goes back to the sharing, doesn't it? As well, it's like Jo, when she was talking about Visa and Heathrow and bringing all that data together. It's sort of the silos, and it made me think of when you scale that down a bit within an organisation. There's so many silos, and you can't share data within your own organisation because HR hold it and sales hold it, and it's all sitting around the organisation. So if we can't bring that together more naturally within organisations, how do we sort of broaden it out and hope to bring it together sort of in the wider landscape?
Well, it's that same thing again that, in healthcare, we want to be able to share data and we can't. We're not allowed. So there's yin and yang, isn't there, to all these technical possibilities.
Can I ask a question? I was going to ask Pete, if there were, in your world, if there's particular sectors that you see who have a leaning towards gamification, is it higher in certain sectors, and also market-wise? I just wondered on the sort of global landscape.
Do you mean where is it being used most?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So,
as in, from your experience, who do you get approaches from most?
Okay, so it has changed over the past 6 months. Okay. But at the moment, there's a lot of projects out there where people are working on gamification and health. So using health data to change your health habits. And we're even working on some like COVID rehab ones for the British Heart Foundation, things like that. And also about data about your travel and whereabouts. We've been helping a project, the Safe Path, something like that, Safe Check Foundation. It's the app that tracks you and sees who you're mingling with. It's not in the UK one, but it's in other parts of the world. That's one side. The other side is e-learning and learning and online, and not just at universities, but all the corporates are now realizing they need to up their game on that side of things. So there's a lot of gamification happening there. And the other bit, actually, it's always been there, is marketing for short-term gamification, but now it's really gone longer. So it's around long-term loyalty, brand experiences. And games are really good for that because you have an engagement in a fun way with a brand, and then you remember that brand, and you've done something together. Yeah, so you're now part of that brand in your mind. And that's a bit that's growing very fast as well. I mean, it's going everywhere though. So at the last conference, I run Gamification Europe, a conference which Karen's spoken at, the first one 2 years ago. Last year's conference, the theme was around where is it broadening out to? What's the future of gamification? And one of the things I noticed was it's appearing in lots of different industries now. From there was a gamified honey trap for hackers. So the website is a honey trap. So they're trying to gather data about the hackers, and they've made it more interesting so the hacker would stay on it longer. And the challenges got more difficult the longer they were on it, and they would dig deeper. And the whole time it was about gathering data about the hackers. Brilliant. So that's like quite fascinating one. But it's just wherever there are people and behaviors to change, it's now appearing. So it's popular. Shame. Does that answer your question?
and how far are the government going to turn to gamification? I know we're going slightly off topic, but over the next 6 months to ensure that we are all COVID secure.
It's interesting. The government seems to be more interested in nudge and other behavioural techniques. So.
They're not very good at any of them, though, are they?
Not working.
The science is supposed to inform a strategy. So considering how poor they seem to be at systems and strategies, I don't think they'd succeed with gamification. It's quite a complex system usually.
But it could be so much easier. You know, you could have a gamified learning program that people follow a journey and they learn how to be a superstar COVID avoider, that sort of thing, and come out at the end of it, you know, with
alive
as a hero, a COVID hero, you know. And it's not hard to do these things actually.
No, that's what my presentation was saying about the digital transformation of a pandemic. I mean, there must be so many people sitting around with experience in digital, frustrated at what we're living through. Anyway,
Ridiculousness.
Yeah, I think the sort of test and trace, you know, the apps or hopefully, you know, there's got to be a way, hasn't it? It's almost like a digital passport to say you can go on a plane quite easily. You know, a friend of mine's about to fly off and she's got to have a physical, you know, test, but then, you know, she's going to get some kind of certificate and paper to get on the plane. But it's that you can see where, you know, the technology and the data and the testing and the apps will really come back into not just the travel and tourism, but you know, getting us people movement again and ability to go out and do things. You know, anyway, I'm sure the technology.
The frustration there is those apps exist and are being used abroad, but not here.
Yeah.
Well, as of tomorrow,
Yeah.
when the main app is released, isn't it? Only a few months late. What I thought was quite interesting is that a lot of the tweaks that they made to the functionality was, in a sense, to make it more personalised. So one of the big things I think they've added to the test and trace app that comes out tomorrow is a local dashboard, essentially, of real time, as close to real time as possible, of cases, hospitalizations, and rates of infection in your area, and it uses a bit of GPS to find that out. So, but I'm on board.
It could go so much further, don't you think?
Sorry?
It could go so much further. It could say, yeah, but the beach near you is packed. Don't go there. Avoid that. You know, there's a heat map of places to avoid because the data's out there.
I don't know if you saw that, but Bournemouth has got some money actually they created an app exactly for that, you know, where is the heat map for the beach. And I'm not sure how successful it was. And actually the media, I think, just were like, emergency declared, which probably turned everybody off Bournemouth, which I think then affected them later on because people didn't go. But yeah, that's a big destination management issue for us, is sort of people movement in times of crisis and health, and that balance between wanting to support the businesses and getting people back, but actually recognizing the local communities in some areas don't want people coming down from London. And it's kind of exactly, if we had a kind of dashboard and a management of some of this, you could kind of navigate a little bit better around, you know, we've basically been going on kind of common sense, going, right, we won't, you know, promote any beaches, but we know we've got outdoors and gardens and things like that. But there could be, I guess, a bit cleverer data between where some of the problems are and the honey sort of pot sites and the crowds and where they're going, and where we push messages to reach people to say, don't come, you know, this weekend, we know it's going to be the weather. There's another thing actually in personalisation, is a lot of destinations are using the weather to drive some of the marketing sort of individually, to say, right, surf's up, or, you know, 30 degrees today, come down, and pushing sort of different videos according to what it's going to be like. But you know, there's a whole host of, I think, opportunity. I guess it's who will drive it, who's got the resource and the scale.
Well, it's difficult. Sorry, go on.
No, sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I was just saying it's difficult because it's like, do you want the visitors or do you not? So you sort of do want the visitors for the trade, but you don't want the visitors for the risk. And trying to mitigate risk at this scale and complexity is a very tricky thing to do. And I think the kind of real-time data-driven insights that you're talking about will only be possible under 5G. I think we all know the weather forecast. For me, I do live very close to the sea, but it's effectively a documentary.
Yeah.
It does not forecast. It fails to forecast consistently. For whatever reason, I don't know. So trying to get accuracy. I mean, I know in the north where my family are from that you can't book a COVID test on the website because they're all full. But if you drive up, there's nobody there and you can just get tested anyway. Yeah. So these are the kind of...
It's the real time, isn't it?
Problems.
Yes. Well, and also the complexity, I think, you know, that we've uncovered really, the complexity of personalisation. We do hold contradictory motivations, you know, whereas a lot of the apps are kind of, they're either appealing to the motivation which is towards pleasure, and so giving you the positive things that you might like, or away from pain, and so telling you the things to avoid, or giving you data, you know, so that you can make choices to not do something. Well, actually, I like both. I'm motivated by both, you know, from minute to minute. I'm constantly thinking about what I don't want and what I do. And I, you know, I think but again, I think you're right. It's about the speed that makes that most accurate. I mean, one of the sessions that we've got coming up was going to be tomorrow, but we've just had to, we've postponed tomorrow's events. We had some technical issues with the ticketing, but one of the sessions is by Gillian Kowalczyk, all around, created called Safe in the City, which is a crowdsourced data app that has basically mapped London, and it's mainly women who generally walk alone for home or live alone and that sort of stuff, have essentially added their data into this app over time, updating it daily. So they've created a kind of a real-time kind of 3D sense of where's well lit, where you know where tends to be safer to walk than other places, where have crimes happened recently, things like that. But again, you know, the kind of motivations away from pain. But in terms of that sort of crowdsourcing, real-time crowdsourcing, as a way to make recommendations and things like that, there seems to be a huge lots of possibilities in that are untapped at the moment.
And on that, actually, because I've been learning to drive, so I've got into using GPS on my phone and maps and things, and there's a really great app called Waze, which crowdsources your routes, so you can see where roads are closed, people are pinging all the time, you can see other drivers. It's really interesting, but yeah, kind of a bit of a privacy nightmare. I was always a privacy nightmare. I've gone completely the other way now. I've just let it all go. Alexa organizes my life. I've got smart lights. I can turn things on and off in the house. I've just let it all go.
Stanza, do you want to come on and tell us a little bit about your Velocity app?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'll leave the video off because I'm on lousy bandwidth. It's an art experiment, basically, that I've been pursuing over 3 years to question and challenge these notions of privacy within city space. Really about this idea that if we can track everybody, we can form ourselves into some collaborative, entangled citizen empowered body. The assumption being that we're greater than the sum of our parts. So it seems to me like that, you know, in one sense, we've been stripped of our agency and on our individualism, that we've been reduced in binary to zeros or ones. So the app is about, if everybody gets together to do something, then, such as walking around the city together, then the output itself demonstrates this as a citizen's empowerment thing. What it also does at the same time is technically is it tracks thousands of people, which is, and gives the data when people input the data. So in my database, it challenges these questions of privacy, how you can give the information away. And obviously for me, the umbrella that this sits under is, you know, are we really contributing to a bigger surveillance space because we are complicit in, we're complicit in the knowledge now that we know that the acquisition of data relies on our input. Since we're complicit in this relationship, what can we do about this? So that's what the artwork is about. And basically, in simple terms, you download the app, a visualization, which is also online, and shows you the movement, it shows you the position, it takes some photographs off your phone, it merges it with smart city data, and it's this moving towards what I sort of call the panoptic world concept. Yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
Fantastic, thank you.
Really interesting.
So unless there's any other burning points or questions or threads untied that people would like to tie, then I might start to bring proceedings to a close. Nobody jumping in, okay. So, so firstly, let's have a really big thank you to all of the contributors presenting their thoughts this afternoon, to Pete, to Karen, to Sam, and to Joe. I've certainly learned something from all of them and been challenged to think a bit more broadly. So thank you very much to all of you. And thank you all of you who've asked questions and taken part in the wider conversation. Like I said, we've got some events coming up over the next few weeks. Now, on here, it does mention that there were 2 planned for tomorrow. Like I said, we're moving those just a couple of weeks down the line into early October, dates to be confirmed very shortly, but the sessions remain the same. So one is all around Brighton and Hove as a city, as a kind of case study, looking at how it can and can't use visitor data for renewal and recovery. So very, very much drawing on some of the things that we've been discussing here with Joe, but looking at everything from economic kind of survival for businesses through to what happens when somebody steps off the train at Brighton station. Do we know where they go, and what do we do with that information, and how is that going to be useful in the future? So Gavin Stewart, who is the chief executive of the Business Improvement District, something Pete mentioned earlier, and the Brighton Hove Economic Forum, will be presenting his take on that, very much also asking questions about what could they do more. And Bonamy, who popped up earlier with some questions, will also be part of that conversation as a data insights expert. So please do book on that as soon as we've released the new date, because that'll be really exciting. And then the same day in the afternoon will be Gillian Kowalczuk's presentation, as I mentioned. Now Gillian's a really fascinating tech entrepreneur, sits on many global panels around women in tech, but particularly with how data is used and how you kind of democratize data in order to create tech applications. And her business, Safe in the City, as I mentioned, will be in profile. So do come along to that. I think that will be really fascinating. And then on October the 6th, we have Pete, who you've had a taster of today. We'll be doing a more in-depth 90-minute workshop, interactive workshop, all around gamification and personalisation. So if you've liked what you've heard, you'll be able to spend a bit more time with Pete then. And then in the afternoon, we will be joined by Dr. Farhana Liza from get this right, it's the Business and Local Government Data Research Centre, who's been doing a lot of analysis over the last few weeks on how artificial intelligence algorithms in online shopping platforms, how they've been sort of tested to the limit often through the rapid changes in online shopping behaviour. So she's got quite a lot of insights about what we've learned through that process and what implications are for the huge spikes in online shopping. So particularly things like supermarkets, where it's gone from sort of 7% of their business to 40% in the space of a few weeks, and how they're adapting. So some really interesting knowledge to share there. So I hope that you will all sign up to those, absolutely free as always, and bookable through the Driverartsdriver.com website. As Karen mentioned earlier, there is a new ignore that website, you can access it through the Driverartsdriver.com. But Karen, did you want to say something about your new program?
Yes, okay, yeah. We're basically, we were supposed to be delivering a lot of training this year, but we all know what happened to this year. So we're delivering it remotely in partnership with Tech Circus. We're doing 2-hour sessions every Monday, 6 till 8 o'clock. basically training people how you do data-driven design and build. And then we're also supporting people to put Superfused Awards applications together, week beginning the 19th, when there is the big music tech conference that Donna's leading on as well.
Absolutely.
Quite a lot going on all of a sudden, and all remote, unfortunately. But it's extended the reach. We got 150 people into the first training session on Monday, last Monday.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely great. So yes, lots and lots to get your teeth stuck into, all free, and as Karen said, there's even funding attached to certain projects if you can find a collaborator to try some new things out using the Gatwick data.
You don't have to have a collaborator.
Ah, there we are.
Just do it anyway if you can.
Do it anyway.
Anyway, hopefully the training program will train you how to work with a live data feed, and you can obviously collaborate if you desire. Driverartsdrivercom. Hopefully that's now drilled in.
So thank you very much all, and we'll see you again very soon, hopefully. But enjoy the rest of your weeks, and embrace the data or run away from it, whatever is your preference.